And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. That's Danny Kanell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/Cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate, where they are participating. We asked for your participation, and you have answered. Not for the mailbag. That's coming up on Thursday, but we said that you had homework because today, by the end of this show, we will have compiled the definitive yearbook of the 2024 college football season. We're going to identify the biggest storylines, the characters, the figures, the games, and try to put it together. If we were to do this and actually print this thing, who would be in the book? Who defined the 2024 college football season? We all have our suggestions. You have been weighing in both in the tailgate and also reaching out on social media and elsewhere. We'll be getting into that in just a little bit. Very excited about who we end up deciding makes the cut, as we are the editors of this fine publication. But first, a little bit from the assistant coaching carousel. We'll be recapping the assistant coaching carousel next week, so be sure to keep your eyes peeled for that. Ohio State's defensive coordinator search is ongoing, and splashy hire to splashy hire. One offseason, you go out, you get Chip Kelly, and while we have not finalized anything, there are multiple reports indicating that Matt Patricia could be the next defensive coordinator for the Buckeyes. They are bringing him on campus. They are going through the discussions as making him the replacement for Jim Knowles. Obviously, Patricia, much longer resume coming from the NFL. DK, what would you splashy name? What do you think it would mean in terms of Ohio State, and how would we apply it to our expectations moving forward?
He's a well-respected defensive mind around NFL circles. Just don't have him call your offensive plays, which inexplicably that's what Bill Belichick had him do as co-offensive coordinator with a special teams coach. That didn't work out great. But as far as the defensive mind goes, I think he's one of the best out there. I think we're seeing this trend because he hasn't been in college football for over 20 years, right? That's where he started his career, but it's been 20 years in the NFL, hasn't been there. We're almost seeing this morph where the games are really becoming very similar, and you're seeing coaches go back and forth from one to the other, where I think historically that might have been a little bit more jarring. But I think you see the minds that come in, the schemes that come in, and you see them have some success. So you're like, all right, if we saw it happen at Michigan where the defense was still just as good with Wink Martindale came in there and was the defensive coordinator. We've already seen Steve Belichick was pretty good last year with Washington. Now he's going to North Carolina. We've got, even on the offense side of the ball, Pat Shurmur, mostly an NFL guy, calling plays for Colorado, did a really good job out there. I just think it's kind of, you go out and you find the best that you can get, and it doesn't matter if they're college guys or pro guys. The schemes, everything's starting to fall in line. So I think it's a big name. It's a huge name. Matt Zenitz this morning told us that he even was there visiting with his family. So, like if the wife is in tow, maybe it's a little more serious.
Hey,
when you're starting to get her to look around, shop for some houses. So I think from a big name perspective, somebody with a resume that builds up as a coordinator, as a coach, it's debatable. I think this would be solid. And it would kind of follow that mindset of Chip Kelly, who was another NFL to college and back and forth type guy.
Yeah, I was going to say it reminds me a lot of the Chip Kelly situation, except for the fact Patricia wasn't a head coach at a college program. But it is like Chip Kelly last year, we had heard, like there were rumblings that he wanted to get back to the NFL. There weren't jobs available for him. So he takes the Ohio State gig, wins a national title. Now he's got a job in the NFL. Matt Patricia, his ideal is probably to get back to the NFL as a defensive coordinator. None of the coaches that were hired this cycle, maybe he had enough connections to get that gig in the NFL. So he's going to go to Ohio State. He's going to have an incredible defense, and his name is going to pop up in the NFL coaching cycle again next year, and maybe he will get that job, or maybe he won't, because as we've seen in recent weeks, they do pay pretty well to be a coordinator at the top of the Power 4 conferences.
I have no idea how this is going to work. I got a lot of opinions on a lot of different college football stuff, but I mean, NFL and college are different. We've seen, some NFL guys come in and do really well. Golden going back to college from the NFL at Notre Dame worked out fairly well, but I don't know, man. Do they have the same agent? kind of curious.
Real. Hey,
it's a valid question. Like, you tell me how often you think head coaches hire assistants who do not share the same agent as them. It ain't frequent.
Well, I mean, the agent head coaching like crossover leaves you with like a few big dogs that make that very, very easy to happen.
Yes, there's only a handful of agents who represent all of these guys too.
Right. I mean, like, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I'm just curious, like, how did he arrive at Patricia? Maybe guys got track records okay.
Is this another chapter in the Ryan Day Homeboy Hall of Fame? Is the man just going out and giving raises?
People know what Homeboy Hall of Fame is.
I mean, so it's an old Bomani Jones.
Shout out Bomani. Yeah.
Yeah. That was from like old school, the Bomani and Jones web series from back in 2012, 2013. We actually did a video that was a Homeboy Hall of Fame where we made the Hall of Fame and created it, and we had inductees and everything else. So yeah, that's when I dropped that reference. Like, good call that we should actually give context there. Not a Cover 3 original there, but a shout out to something from about more than a decade ago. But Ryan Day, I mean, if they do share the same agent, potentially, because you can sell Matt Patricia, you can sell this as like a sensible hire, and you can sell giving him what, $2-3 million a year, plus a house and a car. Oh, where do you want to play? Oh, we can get you on there. Like you can probably get a lot of good golf out of this. Yeah, maybe it's something worth considering. The thing that is interesting to me about the Matt Patricia hire is that if you brought Matt Patricia in with last year's defense, I'd be like, okay, so this is an NFL coordinator with an NFL defense for the most part, right? Older guys that have been around, guys that are highly skilled, athletic, probably, at a point in their careers and development in football where they could have been on an NFL team getting NFL coaching. They're still talented, but it's going to be a different group. And so that's why I think it'll be kind of an interesting play there to see whether or not he changes at all his approach and what that ends up meaning for the Buckeyes, who, like you mentioned, Tom, are still going to be awesome. I mean, they're still going to be really good, but he'll have 4 games where if he were hired, he's really going to be, put in the spotlight in terms of the way that you prepare and the way that you call it. So,
yeah, like eight of Ohio State's games as defensive coordinator are just calling basic ass coverages and letting my guys go be better than the other players.
It's great, but listen, it's also Ohio State. So in those 4 games, you better not be the reason why they end up getting cooked. Okay, one last defensive coordinator related item. I was looking at Auburn's defensive numbers from last year, kind of, like middle of the pack, right? And then DJ Durkin just gets this huge raise. Is there any read here? Was there just extra money in the budget? Like, was he desired by an NFL team? Like, who else was bidding for DJ Durkin?
Yeah, I made the joke about this. Like, we knew Auburn was saving up to have an insane transfer portal haul, and the transfer portal available talent this year just kind of sucked compared to what it was like 2 seasons ago, because everybody with the house money are keeping their studs. So it's kind of like, hey, maybe everybody's just, got leftover money. Well, let's give it to the coaches. It's probably not that. I did see a screenshot from some message board. So,
this is good.
Look, I'm referencing a screenshot, but it is like a guy who's like a moderator on a message board. So I didn't fact check this. I'm just going to tell you what it said. Basically, that Ohio State had interest in Durkin, which I don't know if that's true. Maybe it's just Durkin's agent telling Auburn that Ohio State has interest. Coaches seem to love Durkin, though, man. Like, guy keeps getting hired after the Maryland thing all the time, and I don't think he does any kind of anything special, but I also don't think he's terrible. And if you're Hugh Freeze, this is probably the year you get fired if you don't win something, right? Like, this is kind of the year to kind of put up or shut up. So keeping staff continuity, not the worst thing in the world, I guess.
I mean, he was part of the end of the Jimbo era.
Not my money.
You talk about like coaches seem to still like him, and
I mean, Lane loved facing him when he was at A&M. I know that.
Well, Lane had him as his defensive coordinator.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't get it.
Some of these deals, when you just see guys hand them out just raises, you just wonder what was like, who did they get played? Was there an interest out there that maybe wasn't, maybe it was quiet? Teams are just handing out the money. I think DJ Durkin's a really good coach. So I think should be one of the, I think he's a good defensive coordinator. I think he's pretty good. I think he's a pretty good recruiter. I think he's pretty good. I think he got a raw deal at Maryland. He was able to do a pretty good job at Maryland. He got a raw deal.
Kid died, Danny.
But it wasn't his fault. He got scapegoated for that.
If the courts decided that one way or the other?
No, there was an ambulance that took forever to get there. I think that could happen at a lot of places.
I don't know.
But
I don't like saying he got a raw deal at Maryland. When we look at what coaches, we talk about coaches and how they're responsible for their program. Jordan McNair died in a practice that he was in charge of.
He wasn't there.
But it's his program.
Right.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but for me, it always comes back to this for me with Durkin, comes back to this for me with Brian Kelly. If I had kids, I'm never sending them to play for DJ Durkin. I'm never sending them to play for Brian Kelly. There are how many programs in this country at all single levels? How many, I don't know. I don't get it, Bud. I don't think he does anything special as a defensive coordinator. I think he's fine. I don't think I've ever looked at a DJ Durkin defense and said, wow, they're doing something I've never seen before. This is truly innovative. I think he comes in, he does a solid job of coordinating a defense. I think a lot of it is dependent on the talent that you have. I think Auburn's defense last year was fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't exceptional. It wasn't bad. It was above average. It was fine. I don't know. If I'm Auburn, I guess maybe if you really bought the Ohio State interest, then yes, you do it. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But frankly, if DJ Durkin were to leave my program, I would not be heartbroken. I would just find another coach who could do the job he does.
Did he get the original? I mean, was he just knighted by Urban Meyer back in the day? He's an Urban Meyer grad assistant at Bowling Green, so therefore he gets
That's probably part of it, yeah.
And Muschamp definitely thinks the guy's an awesome coach, and I think a lot of people in the industry probably have a lot of respect for. Muschamp's a terrible head coach, but a really good defensive assistant coach. So if Muschamp has a real high opinion of you as a coach, then that probably helps.
Yeah.
He's moved around a lot. So he's an awesome coach, but yet he never really sticks around somewhere too long.
Yeah. He clearly has the.
Well, most of these were upgrades, right? So when Muschamp got fired at Florida, he had to go somewhere. He went to Michigan for 1 year. I thought he did an okay job there. Then Maryland for 3. If the McNair thing doesn't happen, it probably lasts longer than 3. Maybe not a lot longer.
Maybe not. I mean, it was still a rough go at competitively.
Good at it.
Still at a tough spot.
Ole Miss for 2, and then he got a raise to go to A&M. Although I think Ole Miss was kind of happy to see him go. I don't get $2.5 million.
No,
unless you're thinking have they seen enough internally if they have to fire Freeze that they want this guy to be the future head coach?
Maybe. Hey, we got to.
That would make sense.
I mean, we just got to talk to the 9 cooks in the kitchen from the Auburn power broker. We
know Auburn's typically making great decisions.
Well, listen. Sometimes you make the right investment. You make
$200,000 on Cam Newton was a hell of a decision.
I was about to say, you can go out there allegedly.
Well, I would just like to imagine a scenario if DJ Durkin is the next head coach at Auburn, and people will compare it to Auburn gave Bruce Pearl another chance, as if what Bruce Pearl did is anything like what happened with DJ Durkin at Maryland.
Grant in the tailgate, it would be very Auburn if this move was just to get Durkin as the potential replacement for Hugh Freeze after Hugh Freeze leaves. So we'll see. It was just something that makes you do a quick little double take. Again, the assistant coaching carousel slowly winding down. We'll be doing our recap of the assistant coaching carousel coming up next week. But coming up on the other side, who defined the 2024 season? We're going to give you our best attempt, probably the best attempt at putting together the book for the 2024 season. All that and more next.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, Bud Elliott brought this one up. It's a good idea. Bud's got a lot of good ideas. But the challenge...
Name one.
Write the book of the 2024 season.
Okay, cool. There's one.
All right. Yeah, there's one.
I'm retiring.
How would you do it? And you know what? But it honestly kind of threw me back because remember the commemorative like Sports Illustrated book that you could buy after a championship season, and it would have all the stories from throughout the year, and it would kind of have a nice like intro and a binding to it. So what would we do that? Because we come on here and it's, 2025, things have evolved. What are our written stories, weekly stories, or the conversations that we have here on the Cover 3 podcast? And so we're going to try to identify, I would say maybe like 10 to 12 stories that we would say make the cut for the book on the 2024 season. We'll start by trying to hit the biggest. We'll throw it around the horn here. So, Danny, why don't you get us started? What would you throw as like the first ballot? Like what do you say? All right, I'm Danny Kanell. We're sitting at the editor's table. This has to be included as part of the story of the 2024 football season.
I had Notre Dame making it to the national championship game. So as a part of that story, I had the Northern Illinois loss. Like as one of the, middle chapters, my daughter's doing a thing for school as a pantomime. She's doing a mime thing, and they have like the beginning, the conflict was the section that I think you put this in for Notre Dame, facing that conflict, and it can go one way or another. And it really did galvanize them, and they really were able to turn the season around from that moment, blow out everybody else, get to where they were. Marcus Freeman kind of cements himself. Not that there was a question, but after that game, go back and take the pulse of Notre Dame fans. Said we lost another group of 5 team. Riley Leonard, there were question marks about him. I had him. How good could he be as a thrower? How far could he take him? And to go all the way to where they did, I think it's got to be one of the top stories of the season. And that kind of being a seminal moment for the Irish.
Love that. Let's sit right there for a little bit because I had that one as a top 3. I prioritized a list of about 15. That one was top 3. A lot of great suggestions from the tailgate, and also I had some people reach out as well with their own. And the levels to it are great because, as we identified at the time, Northern Illinois over Notre Dame in Notre Dame Stadium is one of the biggest upsets of the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so just the game itself probably deserves a little bit of spotlight. But you're right. The response was even more of a story and what it meant for Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman delivers, after multiple college football playoff appearances and with one and done showings, Marcus Freeman delivers the first college football playoff wins in Notre Dame football history, then adds to them, then gets them all the way to the national championship game. Along the way, you take out Kirby Smart. Like along the way, you come back from a deficit against Penn State. The number of season-ending and significant injuries that this team took along the way and their ability to continually bounce back. I mean, all American caliber players lost in the month of October, and yet it did not derail their season. Tom, Bud, feel free to jump in. Like this, the Notre Dame story is undoubtedly deserves its own chapter.
I think that, yes, and I think that this game has kind of like 2 takeaways. Like there's the micro version of it, which is part of Notre Dame's story and like the adversity that they have to overcome, the setback, overcoming it, getting all the way to the title game. But I also look at it from the macro sense in how this game was kind of symbolic of the paradigm shift of how we have to view regular season college football games now. Because I went on the rant after this game about how losing at home to Northern Illinois should eliminate you from being considered as a national title contender. You shouldn't even be in the playoff discussion at that. But now in the 12-team era, like this loss happens and Notre Dame doesn't lose another game. So they get into the playoff and then they get to the title game. And it's going to be looked at 10 years from now when we're still maybe in the 14 to 16 team model of how things changed and how the expanded playoff changed the way we view this sport, as this game will be the one we'll point at and be like, well, Notre Dame lost as well, like a 20-something point favorite at home to Northern Illinois, and they still got to the national title game, which is not something that we have seen really. Like even before we got to the playoff or the BCS era, just in the poll era, Notre Dame's probably, they might win like the South Bend Tribune. They might be number one in the South Bend Tribune college football poll at the end of the year. Maybe they claimed that in 1945 or something. But in like all the major polls, that loss would have eliminated them from consideration right from the jump. So it's just an example of how this sport is going to shift and how we have to respond to these things differently.
And I think the word respond there is really important because the Irish did respond. Like they got better. Freeman, I talked about how like they had to change how they practiced a little bit, how they handled rest stuff coming off that A&M game. I know it was a big thing inside that building, and they decided to make some changes there. I had for like 6 teams that I feel like you couldn't leave off. Notre Dame was one of the 6 for sure. Like that to me was pretty big, and it also ticks off. I mean, Chip drive for sure, but like it fits into like the first year of the playoff a ton. And we also are probably going to talk about how many upsets we had this year and like the flattening of the sport and everybody being able to have talent now. And like Georgia can't hoard talent anymore like it once did. But Notre Dame avoided those upsets the rest of the year. That's notable to me.
Yeah. Lane Whiffen in the tailgate says, didn't y'all say that was the game that was going to get Freeman fired? I remember pointing out that one of the most damning comments came out of Freeman's mouth after the game when he said, "We've been here before." And it's like, yeah, that's the problem, Marcus. We can't be losing to Marshall and Stanford and NIU. Like that's the issue. But as you said, like he got better, they got better, and Notre Dame's run 100% deserving of one of the big chapters there in our Cover 3 college football yearbook for 2024. All right, Tom, I mean, there's an obvious one because it encompasses like 4 different storylines. And I think that if there was a picture, is it right there? Is that it? Is that the bow? Is it the flag plant? Is it Jack Sawyer throwing his helmet on? Or is it Jack Sawyer throwing his helmet on just put right next to running the other way there in Jerry World, taking the ball right down the field for a game-sealing touchdown against Texas? Ryan Day, Ohio State, the flag plant, the hot seat, the run to the title. I mean, can we just sort of squish all those into one chapter? Is it even possible?
It is interesting, like Ohio State winning the national title and their entire season. It's not that dissimilar to what we just talked about with Notre Dame. Like, obviously, coming off of the losses to Michigan the last few years, Michigan winning a national title, Ohio State's response by ponying up to keep these guys in Columbus, having them come back, basically going all in, spending the money to get Chip Kelly to come be the offensive coordinator, Ryan Day sacrificing his play calling duties, and everything going swimmingly for the first part of the season. Yes, you lost to Oregon, but as a 1-point loss on the road that nobody was holding against you. Cruising to the end of the year, Michigan looking like ass all season long. So now you head, the Michigan game. We're going to end the losing streak. We're going to beat the Wolverines, and then we're going to win the Big Ten, and we're going to go on and win the national title. And then you lose to Michigan. And it is not the same thing as losing at home to Northern Illinois as far as like the upset kind of national, like what the F factor. But it was also kind of the same thing as far as how the hell did this Ohio State team lose to this Michigan team? And then the fallout that comes from it, where it's like, we had talked before the season began about Ryan Day being on the hot seat, and that kind of dissipates. But then they lose to Michigan, and it's like, holy crap, Ryan Day is right back where we thought he was going to be. They might lose in the first round to Tennessee. They might fire his ass the very next morning. All this stuff. There's articles being written about maybe Ryan Day's just going to walk away. Maybe he's tired of this crap. He's tired of dealing with Ohio State fans. And then they just absolutely smoke Tennessee. And then they smoke Oregon. And then they take care of it's just like they take care. It's the team that we had seen in September that was playing nobody and looked incredible suddenly reemerged in the playoff, but they weren't playing nobody anymore. They were playing playoff teams, and they looked that good against them. So just the kind of roller coaster ride of the Ohio State season, which culminates in winning a national title. I mean, that's probably the first chapter in my season of 2024 book.
When you describe the team, normally you'd have a Joe Burrow-led 2019 LSU, Trevor Lawrence, Clemson, something like along those lines. Is this team remembered as the $20 million roster?
Yes.
I think so too, because I don't think of it as Will Howard or Jack Sawyer had the play, but I don't know if there was one really superstar that stood out. So I think it's going to be remembered as kind of the first, superstar class of the NIL era where that 20 million, even though it wasn't the most spent with Texas, getting $22 million class, it was just the one that we all referenced all season long.
It might also be remembered as like the last team that really could do this and kept all their guys together, because it was the last year before the house money came in, before some of these kind of like mid and lower level P5s can really afford to keep their guys. Right. So with the benefit of hindsight, our opinion of this Ohio State team might change a bit. Like if Jeremiah becomes what we think he can become, it's going to be like, oh yeah, that was the Jeremiah Smith freshman team, and he carried them in the playoffs. And they had a bunch of, veterans who decided to come back, and they were like good players. But if you're looking at some of these early mock drafts, does Ohio State have anybody projected in the top 20? I think it's just Simmons, the left tackle, who missed the last like 6 or 7 games. So they ended up keeping a lot of like good college players who were, by some draft guys probably overhyped. So like maybe they would have come back, cheaper in the future. So who knows? Maybe they won't be the last team to keep everything together, but I think there's some chance that they are.
I like that framing of it, because even Jeremiah Smith, for all of the like superstardom that just sort of emits from the way he plays the game, there were still games where he was kept in check, like there was this, it was still games where Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson,
he was kept in check.
Yeah. I mean, it was an entire team, which also probably, Danny, to your point, takes us back to Ryan Day as kind of the main character of it all. And just, I mean, even like he hired Bill O'Brien, and Bill O'Brien's gone, and now we're hiring Chip Kelly, and just all the pieces that were going on and all the shifting that happened, and to finish it with the national championship. I will tell you, the closest I came to being on the opposite side of where we landed with Ohio State was the Friday night. I believe it was Friday, December 20th. There were videos going viral of how Orange had taken over bars in Columbus.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Before the game started. So the night before the game, you're looking at all of these shots of them playing Rocky Top on every touch tunes in every single bar in Columbus, seemingly. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if Tennessee wins this game and there's 20,000, 30,000 Tennessee fans in the shoe, this is going to be it. And it took 8 minutes of football on Saturday night for me to say, well, okay, this is not going to be it, at least not this week. The Ohio State Buckeyes, the national champs are always going to get a spot in the yearbook, but man, it is hard to imagine, as you said, Tom, the roller coaster that the Buckeyes took us on from the end of last season, the $20 million roster, preseason top 2, and everything that happened along the way.
Another little fun footnote is Ross Bjork spending like the previous 13 years at 2 schools who pretended they can win a national title and never did, and then showing up at Ohio State and winning one in his first season. So shout out to Ross. Finally getting there.
And if you want names to that without having to go to Wikipedia, that'd be Ole Miss and Texas A&M.
Just taking shots for no reason. Just felt like doing it.
Why not? Hey, speaking of the SEC, you get a chapter 2, SEC versus the CFP, and more of the storylines that define the 2024 season. Next.
I feel home when I see the faces that remember my own. When I'm with my friends, I feel home.
back here on the Cover 3 podcast as we are putting together the stories that defined the 2024 season. I'm trying to put together a little Cover 3 yearbook, but I'll let you through what we've already gotten. Notre Dame, the Northern Illinois loss, how they responded. We've gotten Ryan Day, the flag plant, the run to the title. Where do you want to take this next? Let's start a new chapter.
So, since you teased it a little bit, I think when I asked on Twitter, like to make sure I wasn't missing anything in my notes, and I thought the Cover 3 tailgate responded just incredibly. A lot of it was like Bama post Saban, but I really think it's kind of the SEC post Saban, and nobody stepping up to truly fill that void. Maybe that is all these SEC teams cannibalizing one another to where none of them are special teams. Like I think there's a lot of good teams. It's still the most talented league, but it's probably a lot more balanced out, because you have teams like an Arkansas or an Ole Miss who probably fell short of their goals, but still, Ole Miss beat Georgia, right? Arkansas beat Tennessee. They would knock one another off a little bit. So I think like the void that Nick Saban left hurt Alabama, but also, the SEC was down this year. Like even Josh Pate admitted it the other day. Like it was down, and like that takes a lot, right? So, I heard it on his show. Yeah, right. And I personally, I think it's going to bounce back in a major way this year, but it was really not a good league this year. It was a deep league, but it wasn't a good league at the top, which is how we generally measure leagues. Like who are your best teams, and quarterback play was a part of that. But also I think, Saban leaving is also a part of that.
It's a basketball league.
It is. And a baseball
league.
Do
you think that's paying off for them, by the way? Like, do you think SEC fans give a damn about basketball now?
Yeah.
I think Alabama and Auburn fans definitely do.
I mean, some of the venues they've had, I think that's one of the genius things they've done is they've taken some of the passion that they've always had for football and translated it into basketball. Like a guy like Bruce Pearl, what he did, like bringing some of that energy there, he really embraced, let's come out, let's make it an everything school. I think that everything school thing is kind of caught on. Like I do think about when kids apply, like remember how they say when Bama wins a championship, they're like, oh, the applications went up. Look at how it's great. Well, why do you think they applied? Because they wanted to go watch a winner and they wanted to watch that. Well, while you're there, if you're basing your college decision on wanting to watch a good football team, wouldn't it make sense that you would want to go watch a good basketball team too? Yeah, so like the scenes there are starting to become pretty impressive. The atmospheres. Okay.
Yeah, and I think too, like Kentucky's a basketball school. Nobody else in the SEC is a basketball school for the most part. But I do think that while most fan bases will never care about basketball as much as they care about their football, it is fun when your teams are good, whether cares.
Like Auburn fans aren't happy overall because their basketball team's good as long as football continues to suck, right? Like it's still ancillary for all those teams except Kentucky. Like if Arkansas basketball was actually good and their football still sucked.
Well, the problem, and we're going to get a visit from Matt Norlander coming up here soon. And so the thing with Auburn and Alabama is they're not just good, like they are
1 and 2 in the country right now.
Yeah, they're incredible. Like they are not just winning games in the SEC. They are showing out as some of the best teams in the entire country, national championship contender type stuff. And that is for their own program history, so rare. And so when you ask, like, is it paying off? I'm going to say yes, because the investment that they made is in coaching. And that's what they've done is they've got the coaches, they've bought the players, they put together a winning product. And it is not hard to ask college kids to come and party 2 times a week, 1 time a week, celebrating a winner. And I think that that's how they've created this environment where college basketball, I would say college basketball more than college football, home court advantage and home court environments probably have a real impact in both the way the game plays out, but also in sort of like the way that the sport is presented.
I might put an irrationally large bet on the Gators to win the national championship in basketball.
That was so good last night.
I mean,
Condon goes down.
An emotional hedge.
Beat Auburn last night, right?
Yeah. No, they beat Mississippi State. Blew them out in the second half.
Good?
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, Mississippi State's pretty good. Again, Chris Jans, he went out and got a good coach.
I'm actually going to tweet this out now. I'm going to tweet Bud's question. Does SEC basketball being incredible make you feel better about how SEC football performed this season?
Right. Like, does it fill the football-sized hole in your heart? Because I'm like my SEC fan, like friends, I feel like they're pretending about it, to be honest. Like, oh, look at we beat Auburn basketball. It's like,
oh, they're making themselves feel better.
Yeah. Cool.
So one thing
that does it for you now, does it? Okay.
I'm happy that like the Big Ten became the SEC in football, and now the SEC is the Big Ten in basketball, and that they're great in the regular season, but they still haven't won a national title in like what 15 years.
I feel like
when I was putting together my brainstorming, I said the expanded college football playoff is sort of a theme that runs through a lot of these stories, so you can't necessarily identify that. And the at-large selection process, to even look at that as a storyline, just comes down to the SEC, because we had Alabama, we had Ole Miss, we had South Carolina, we had 3 incredibly passionate fan bases. We had a program in Alabama that, to your point, is in the shadow of Nick Saban, first year without him, and they are all sitting there with a shot at making the college football playoff. They are all sitting there where they can go back and literally find one play that if it goes a different direction, they are 1 win better and they are into the field. They are making their voices heard, both the fans online and the fans on TV or everybody else. They are pointing at Indiana. They are pointing at SMU. We are talking about strength of schedule. And the debate around these last at-large spots was fiery, in part because I think we had these SEC schools involved. But ultimately, the SEC ends up being left out. The SEC, which has, objectively a higher rated players coming into their programs and objectively more players getting selected to the NFL draft, they finish with 3 teams in the college football playoff, while the Big Ten finishes with 4. And so I had it as SEC versus the CFP. The season does not play out as they hoped. The final results, the bracket didn't play out as they hoped. And there's a lot of finger pointing, but ultimately I think that the results in other bowl games kind of changed how much ammo that argument had for the SEC, saying that the process was unfair or that Alabama deserved a spot in the college football playoff. Fair?
I think so. Yeah.
I do think hypothetical victories deserve their own chapter.
That's the thing. It's like hypothetical victories. Who would win on a neutral field? Like all of those aspects of the debate were took up a lot of our time.
I'm going to save Ryan's question for Norlander, because I think it's a good one. It was one I was going to ask, but I don't want to derail this into more basketball talk.
Okay.
But if you're in the chat, I thought that was good. I think the portal disappointment teams probably has to be like the teams that were heavy portal and disappointed. Obviously, our Knowles, and then also Ole Miss, I think, right? Like now they're reloading and they're trying to get like to make another run at it. But, look at this. It's like Ole Miss has to be, if you're a big Ole Miss booster, and obviously like camo money is going to be camo money that they're going to still spend. But I mean, you got to be pretty pissed how the season played out, right? Like that sucked. You had a cakewalk schedule and you don't make the playoff with that kind of spending like that. And if you're a Knowles fan, I think you're apoplectic, right?
Yeah, let's stay right there, because there is
now you're hoping to go 8-5.
We get a chapter.
Eat
the
dog.
Oh yes, you do. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So,
We get a chapter. All right.
The chapter is probably called like
Time slot champs.
The onset of the great variance caused by the transfer portal. It's another chapter you probably need to wait a couple years to write to see if this happens to more rosters, like with just crazy, like echocardiogram or whatever, EKG, like up and down, right? Or whatever we call that with the heart rate. But I think you're probably going to see a lot more variance year to year in some teams' records. Probably not like 13-0 to 2-10, but it can certainly happen, as we just saw.
Florida State gets its own chapter. Okay, let's go there. Okay. This is already running longer than I thought, but I'm glad because the discussion is good. But damn it, we're going to get this one in as a top 5 chapter. All right. Florida State going 2-10 in a very winnable ACC, while also suing the conference because they're too good for the conference.
Fake news. They never did that. The
FSU guy not eating the dog poop, like 100%, one of the biggest talking points of September and October. The fact that it started in Ireland in week 0 with
a drive down the field of an opening drive, which they marched the ball down the field, and it looked like they were going to have revenge on Kirk Herbstreit and every other hater that was out there. And that was the high point of the season.
Like that one drive, and yeah, that's the other thing, Danny, is in the similar way to how Ohio State's story starts at the end of last year, Florida State's story starts with the snub and then leads into this year. You've got all the portal spending, and then from Ireland to
TJU disappointment.
Oh, God.
Oof. Yep.
Well, you can't be disappointed if you never expected anything to begin with.
What I mean, we don't need to lean in on it. Like, we definitely don't need 8 minutes on it. But like, is any other way that you would? I mean, do you know what else I was thinking about with Florida State? The stadium was under construction too.
Oh,
so
yeah.
an already sad scene looked
Yeah.
even sadder.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, there was just you were getting kicked to ESPNU. You know, you were like having some tough scenes out there.
In a good time slot, of course. But
Good time slot. Yeah, time slot champs.
Idiot fans trying to dunk on Florida State by saying that they were all right because we're using another season to justify a decision made the previous season. Grant.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, this is difficult. It's difficult, but it is undeniably a huge part of it. All right, so let's pair it with this. Do you think that Miami's season would be worth inclusion in the yearbook? Now we're starting to get to
Yes.
would it be in it?
I don't think that, like, okay, my test was, if you left it out, does the yearbook feel incomplete? I don't think so. I don't think you can leave out Florida State. I don't think you can leave out Ole Miss.
I don't think you can leave out Miami, though. Cam Ward, the kind of miracle finishes against Virginia Tech, the comeback against Cal, like and then just blowing it at the end. Like, I think that has to be part of it too. Like, Miami was probably the best team in the ACC this year, and they blew it.
Yeah, I think the recency bias is probably coloring, how if Miami had won the ACC championship, we're talking about it real fast, even if they're a one and done in the college football playoff. Like that, Cam Ward was awesome.
Mhm.
Miami's offense was like flames all season long. And the comebacks, the dramatics, it seemed like that was the kind of season that kind of had us stop saying things like back, right? Like Texas had already blown through that door. We don't really talk about Texas being back anymore. Miami is. Now, Miami is not what Miami was in that you're winning national championships, but what Miami is much better than where Miami was.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say Cam Ward. I'd say Cam Ward definitely deserves a spot in there. And if you wanted to package those two together.
I have a couple chapters I think need to be in here.
Same. I've still got a list.
Same.
I think you could go with Ashton Genty and Travis Hunter as separate chapters for the seasons that they had, but I would put them together because it's just the unique quality of the seasons they had, and also like the debate that it led to as far as the Heisman, because like it was an angry debate, and it was the angriest kind of debate that I remember, like online and just even among like actual voters since 2016 when it was Lamar versus Deshaun Watson. Like, because that got pretty kind of, Clemson fans were a bit Ohio State-ish at that time of the year when Lamar won the Heisman, and then when they went on to win the national title, it just got even worse. But I just think that you look at the seasons both had. Genty had a spectacular year. Travis Hunter did stuff we just weren't used to seeing, like a true two-way player kind of thing. And I think overall, it was just like those two dominated as far as individual players are concerned the entire season.
Had them other individual players.
Oh no, we got to sit in this because I think Thompson.
I think Travis Hunter playing two ways. Like there's a lot. Like the Dion, you can draw a lot from that chapter on those two players. Boise State getting to the playoff and getting a seed. Like you can extend this out.
Number 3 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the only loss that they had in the regular season, being against Oregon in a game that was thrilling. The fact that he was chasing Barry Sanders' record, the fact that, as you mentioned, Hunter had done something we hadn't done, and then them going against each other, and the fact that the Heisman Trophy race in the year of our Lord 2025 didn't have a quarterback. I mean, there were quarterbacks that were in the mix to get invited, but there was no one for a large portion of the season. Like once Miami lost to Georgia Tech, I think that Cam Ward had taken enough of a step back that it had really become a Travis Hunter a Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty type debate. And for an award that has been so dominated by quarterbacks, to have those two at the center of it. They're not from blue bloods. They are not from traditional powers. Neither of them are contending for a national championship. Like that, the Ashton Genty, the Travis Hunter versus Ashton Genty, I love that, Tom. That's the way I saw it too. We put them together and we tell that story, because I don't know if we're going to have a Heisman race like that again for a while. So it's definitely one of a kind and something that's exciting to think about from 2024.
Yeah, as Garrett just said in the chat, it was nice to have a Heisman race because multiple guys deserved it, as opposed to nobody deserving it and just one guy kind of pulling away.
Well put. I like that a lot. All right, Danny, you said you got something?
Yeah. So we kind of covered it there. We can maybe talk, but I have one that I think deserves priority of that. I mean, post Saban, Alabama. Going from September where they beat Georgia and feel like they're on top of the college football world, to then losing to Vanderbilt, to having the ups and downs that they did. Doesn't Kalen DeBoer's first year have to be in a chapter in college football? Can you tell it without it?
I thought it was just 2 games, really, that like to tell the Bama season, like the Vandy game and the Georgia game. I don't know if it's like
Oklahoma
chapter.
Oklahoma and the bowls. What about the bowl game?
Yeah, just 3 points in Norman, when if you had been able to score 27, you make the college football playoff. Diego.
Or do you include them in the Vandy's SEC left out? Like, do you include that as part of the SEC being down? Quarterback play was bad.
Post Saban SEC, maybe post Saban SEC is a way to get a lot of that all together.
Do Vandy's fans celebration get its own chapter? Carrying the goalposts to the river. Just that was a fun time. Diego Pavia doing the interviews. It's like, I think Diego Pavia probably deserves, if not a chapter, a section of a chapter.
Yeah, he deserves like the little breakout box, where we can sort of have like a little special feature of it, because our friend Mark Ennis mentioned that right off the jump. I too solicited for like, hey guys, like, what would you say? And just right as soon as I fired it, Mark responded. He was like, Diego Pavia. Like, I mean, just a singular star that was slaying giants and just commanding so much deserved attention. The Vandy celebration of taking the goalpost down Broadway is pretty amazing. The bachelorette parties turning their head to just see some goalposts getting carried down the street. The Pavia Mafia is the family and all the pieces of that. Barton Simmons. I mean, maybe Barton deserves his own chapter. Vandy's season. The dentist deserves his own chapter. He actually showed his face, even if his face was covered by ski goggles.
So where do you put, because I had a chapter, I don't know if it's the right term, but I like Cinderella stories. And I would put the Vanderbilt's a part of that, but they didn't make the playoff.
Indiana.
Like, I think there are teams like Arizona State,
Indiana has to have
SMU, first year in the ACC, and I know they probably don't want to be referred to as Cinderellas, but they were teams that a lot of people did not pick, and they might be perennially in this conversation. But the first year of the expanded playoff, like newcomers, maybe new college football, like new bloods, some chapter like that where you might be seeing these teams more often, and then breaking that barrier. Which it feels like in the 4 team, it was much harder, clearly, but we'd always have that. Who's going to be the team that gets there the first time? And we had this many teams in the first year of the expanded playoff get in for the first time.
I would have the Ohio Bobcats in there. And then also, I think that like Army and Navy both being good enough into the season to be like talked about as possible playoff teams, I think is huge, because it's been a long time. I mean, we have seen one of them be good in a given season. We haven't really seen 2 of them be as good as they were this year in a while. And the fact that they were both doing it while in a conference, because Army joined the American, I think that's part of the story too. But I definitely think like Indiana deserves its very own chapter, just because like we all kind of expected SMU would be good in the ACC. Maybe we weren't predicting they would win the league. Nobody, like we were like, hey, Indiana with this schedule, they can get to a bowl game this year. Nobody saw what happened coming.
3rd place in America, right? The bronze medalist of the 2024 season. Only lost to Ohio State and Notre Dame, right?
Their own chapters a little
Do we
bit.
put Arizona State in this too?
I think I think that would be the chapter.
Yeah,
I would
they actually won games in the playoff.
I would have an entire chapter for the Big 12 because like that conference literally flipped on expectations. All the teams we thought were going to be good were bad, and all the teams at the bottom we weren't expecting much from had great seasons. Arizona State, BYU, Colorado, all of them.
I had chaotic Big 12 title race ends in a 4-way tie, and I had Cam Scatterbo leads Arizona State into the playoff. That probably does need to all be combined into one little.
What do you do with Oregon, who is 13-0, beat 2 playoff teams, were perfect, and then get boat raced?
Won the Big Ten.
Yeah,
in their
won the
first
conference
year. They beat Ohio State. They beat Penn State. They beat Michigan. They beat Michigan in Ann Arbor.
They were one of the only two new teams to the Big Two that actually showed out and played well.
With them in Texas.
Yeah.
It is weird. Like the way that it ended just kind of makes it a totally forgotten season.
Right.
It's like they become a footnote all of a sudden.
That's a good name of the chapter.
Yeah.
The footnote season.
A web footed.
Yeah, the whole
web footnote season.
web footnote season.
Words.
Army and Navy combining for 22 wins. Army winning the American Athletic Conference. They both won bowl games. Navy beat Oklahoma. I definitely think that the historic year for the serve. They were both in the top 25 at the same time for the first time since like the 60s or something crazy like that. I definitely think that America's teams from America's game definitely would get a little bit of a look, both for the seasons themselves, but then also their relationship to each other for sure.
Probably Ohio. I would have is like for them to lose what they lost post spring and still go on that run is, I mean, for me, one of the stories of the year. And it's obviously, if you're listening to the 55th minute of a college ball podcast on a Wednesday in February, you might also agree. But I mean, Danny, you had Tim Albin on your radio show. Like, remember what he was saying about what they lost? Like,
yeah. And you can see he was pissed. Like, he's like, this is messed up. He's like, we just lost 6 starters after spring. What do you do then? And for him to do what he did was absolutely phenomenal.
It's crazy.
I would also
hold on, but I know DK's got to run to CBS Sports HQ, but I want to make sure he sees this one from the tailgate. Forget the college football book. What about the Cover 3 book? DK skimping out on the beard bet. That deserves a chapter. Bud and DK hating America. Also, because that ties into Army Navy, right? Just continually betting against Army and Navy and believing their success was scammy. Chip Sicko Mode Evolution and so much more. Anything else in the Cover 3 book that we would need to the live show?
The live show with 4 people that were there because of a blizzard of a century in Dallas. That definitely gets a chapter. But the production was awesome. And what the company did to help us out and get us there and put it on was phenomenal. But just
there were dozens,
over by the blizzard.
okay? Dozens.
I think we had 80.
Yeah, about
75, 80, something like that.
You know,
and I feel like I met most of
the fact the Live Nation guys were also there and they saw how much snow you had to get through to get to the live show is like very good if you want to do a future show.
Yeah.
On the opposite side, we're doing all these happy stories for teams. I would do we talked about Florida State, but what about Liberty, who is a team that we look at in this new Conference USA as they're supposed to dominate that league just because of the financial advantages that they have. And we're currently in a state of college football where financial advantages are probably more important than ever before.
And yet QB, you needed the bench, I think. And remember Salter tried to transfer.
Didn't really get any interest.
I think what happened is he didn't actually have the credits to transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come back and you lose all your leverage in NIL, right? Because they're like, oh, yeah, where are you going to go? Right. But that doesn't necessarily make the employee happy when he comes back. He's like, he's not an employee because the school says he's not. But that's how it was told to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder what his happiness level was throughout the season.
Yeah, and for them to go 5-3 in conference play, including losing to Kennesaw State, who was previously winless at that point, just an absolute turd of a season for Liberty. And then speaking of turds of the season, Purdue having maybe one of the worst seasons I can remember from a power league team in a long time. What was like half their losses they gave up at least 50 points in, and like the other ones were all at least 30. Just absolutely dog walked week in and week out, except for the Illini game where they were suddenly great, but they still lost.
Well, shout out to Ryan Brown.
Yeah.
North Carolina
That's
quarterback.
the kind of team I think will have a big turnaround.
You think that Purdue will have a good turnaround?
Yeah, just because like
They're gonna win 3 games.
Like there's no way that's just roster talent. Like Purdue's always had some of the worst roster talent in the Big Ten, and they're never that bad. Like to me, that was like culture, quitting, that type of stuff. So
Yeah, I expect they'll lose a lot of games next year, but they'll be much more competitive in those losses than they were this year. At least, God, if I'm a Purdue fan, I hope for your sake they're more competitive in those losses than they were this year, because those games were done by halfway through the first quarter most weeks.
do we want a chapter on like the lack of good quarterback play that all the top teams had? Like the year of good teams, not good quarterbacks?
It's not worth its own chapter, but Carson Beck going from Heisman favorite, number 1 pick projection to injured and transferring out. Maybe he's the cover athlete of the failed expectations of quarterback play. I mean, what quarterbacks in college football lived up to their preseason expectations?
It probably is the SEC chapter, to Ryan's point.
Like Shador did. Cam Ward did.
I don't think any league had quarterback play that was so far below expectation other than the SEC, right?
Right.
Like DJU sucked, but like Klubnik played up the level. Cam Ward played up the level. I think Ohio State got what they wanted to get out of Will Howard. Clearly, Gabriel was worth the money totally for Oregon. I mean, like people were talking about Drew Aller coming out and maybe being the first overall pick, which I thought was silly, but talent-wise, like he had a lot of nice moments.
But Carson
played really well for Indiana.
Carson Beck turned into a turnover machine. Nico wasn't quite what a lot of people thought Nico was going to be.
Jackson Dart, I think, was not the problem in Ole Miss, though. I think Jackson Dart was everything you needed him to be in Ole Miss. The rest of it, just a couple weird losses.
Jalen Milroe, maybe not what you were looking for.
No.
Yeah. Wegman not playing up potential.
And what's the final grade on Quinn Ewers?
Hey, he's
Quinn Ewers.
It's Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
There's some throws he can make, and there's some he just can't.
Was Georgia Tech game of the year?
No.
I thought it was. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say Alabama, Georgia, or the first Oregon, Ohio State.
Yeah, I think so.
First Oregon, Ohio State felt like the Alabama, Georgia game was theater. Oregon, Ohio State felt like a better football game.
Yes.
I mean, Bama Vandy was also like wild.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because it had that, like, is this really happening element to it? Like we've seen Kirby's teams choke against Bama time and again. Like that really wasn't that surprising, especially not at that time of the season.
Well, you thought that Alabama was going to blow it when Georgia comes roaring back.
Yeah, I just mean like in general, like, they're probably the better team, and yet they can't find a way to beat Bama.
Yeah.
Another game.
NIU, Notre Dame.
Williams.
Arizona State, Texas has got to be up there too.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
For sure.
Another game that I don't think was one of the best games, but it was one of the more memorable games, was the Georgia-Texas regular season game.
Throwing the stuff on the field?
And Texas fans throwing crap on the field and not technically getting the refs to overturn the call because they were going to overturn it anyway, but kind of getting the refs to overturn the call.
I think you have to put, even though it was not an entertaining from a quality of play standpoint, I think you got to put Michigan, Ohio State there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's like one of the.
Is this really happening type element?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no one won that game. One team just lost more, made more bad plays.
What was that about war? Nobody wins. One side just loses more slowly.
Not at all worth a entire chapter, but something that just sort of came up as I was brainstorming it. How about Matthew Sluka? And just sort of like,
yeah.
Again, like one of those things where it's the story itself, is like small, but sort of the conversation that came with it, having a starting quarterback for a conference title contender allegedly going to his head coach and trying to rework or re-clarify the terms of NIL negotiations, only to leave the team mid-season. And then that team goes on to still go and play for a Mountain West Conference title. The UNLV quarterback, Matthew Sluka, and just kind of the sign of the times of it all that there was with that situation.
Do you think it?
Go ahead.
Do you think it? I would say no chapter on that because Heisman Williams stepped in and played well. If UNLV had went in the tank after that, then I think it probably is a chapter. You'd be like, oh wow, like this is our first public NIL opt-out of a player that really impacted the season.
Right.
Not really a chapter, but a short essay. The Lincoln Riley USC Oklahoma story about how nobody's winning that divorce.
No.
Yeah.
One of them got the country club membership. The other one got a house, but now they've been punching the greens, and the country clubhouse is under renovation, and the house has sprung a leak in the front yard. It's a tough scene out there. Nobody's winning.
It is strange how like both of those programs are pretty much in the exact same place as the other one right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. A lot of hot seat coaches ended up okay. Again, not a chapter, but just something that came up during brainstorming. Billy Napier, Sam Pittman, Dave Aranda at the top of every hot seat list going into the season. Varying levels of success from all three, but all three are back for 2025. So that was something interesting that came up when I was trying to think about some of the big storylines of the season. Any others?
This is the first year the helmet communication and the sideline tablets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it impacted games quite as much as people thought it would, but I do think it slowed the sport down some, which also probably contributed to the increase in upsets that we had this year and the flattening of the sport. Fewer plays, less opportunity for you to actually pull away from the opponent. So maybe that's in that, like the effects of multiple years of change to the sport, creating a more level playing field.
It did impact substitutions and how that sometimes made coaches mad on the sidelines.
That is.
Yeah, that was somebody did send in Brett Bielema deserves his own chapter both for Illinois season, but especially
I'll be writing an Illinois book on its own with plenty of different chapters. I don't know if Illinois deserves an actual chapter in the 2024 season though.
Yeah. Okay, let me make sure. Don't forget, Ohio lawmakers made the flag planting illegal.
Tried to.
One.
Ohio lawmaker.
Ohio lawmaker. Pittsburgh 7-0 start, then 0-6 collapse. Not going to make the book, but we get like one of those at the power conference level every year.
Illinois did it. That's what got Ron Zook fired.
Like a 6-0 or 7-0 start when you just lose out the rest of the way. Definitely something. Let's see. I got into the numbers and I was like, what was the most read stories of the season? Y'all like rankings. I'm sorry. That's when people love rankings.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the stories was actually one from the month of December that really resonated. Was a story by our own John Talty about Darian Mensah's deal at Duke as being a sign of the time for the quarterback market. So, the way that it, again, not a chapter, but certainly probably a storyline that will carry into 2025 and beyond. It's just sort of the way that schools are choosing to apply the positional value to their NIL payments and how they structure their budget in what is essentially a salary cap. So it's another thing that seemed to resonate with the fans a lot as we look back at the season. All right, anything else?
Not on the 2024 season, but as early results of the poll about SEC basketball. Early results right now are that no, SEC basketball being incredible does not make them feel better about their football.
This is good polling.
This is good. Get out of here, Pew. You ain't got nothing. All right. Hey, look, this is the perfect kind of, setup heading into a Thursday, because some of you are listening, some of you are watching, and some of you are thinking, I cannot believe that they did not mention this. Well, do you want to mention it? Come hang out with us Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. It'll be the big old bag of mail, interactive here in 2025. That means that if you jump in the tailgate before the show and you offer your question, we'll be able to grab it. We might even hit it right off the top of the show, but we'll certainly be coming back to them throughout the hour. If you reach out to us individually with a really good prompt, really good question, we'll be able to mention it on the show. And as always, as we've done for years, if you leave us a 5-star review and in that review put a mailbag question, we'll throw it in the big old bag of mail. Many thanks to everybody who jumped in. I think our book will be a bestseller. Can't wait for all the publishing checks to come in. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fornelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Maybe I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe I won't.